Spears. Let's bring in Jeff Darlington for some coaching news. Jeff, Mike McCarthy's future is in question after that ugly loss to the Packers. Where does that situation stand today after the emotion is kind of worn off there?
Yeah, what's up, fellas? Yeah, look, when it comes to Jerry Jones and his decision on Mike McCarthy, quite frankly, you mentioned the emotion. Jones not even willing to go there after the game because he said he expected his season to be continuing, that he hadn't thought about it for a second. But of course, now he must. McCarthy has only 1 year left on his contract. We should point out Dak Prescott, for what it's worth, did endorse his coach. He said he's been amazing. I don't know how there can be questions about his future, but I understand the business. No doubt about it, Kev. We know there are questions about McCarthy, and we'll be keeping a close eye in the coming days. Nick Sirianni as well. This one wild, given the fact that he was just in the Super Bowl a year ago, but the questions are definitely loud right now within the background. Now, I want to point something out. Only 2 coaches have been fired in the season after losing the Super Bowl. Bill Callahan by the Raiders in 2003 and John Fox by the Broncos in 2014. Talk about a difference in outcomes. The Raiders haven't won a playoff game while employing 10 other coaches since that firing. The Broncos won Super Bowl 50 a year later. Bill Belichick now interviewing with the Atlanta Falcons. As weird as it is to read, it is the truth. Falcons interview Bill Belichick for head coach position. I think what this tells us is it just lets the reality soak in that Belichick is now a free agent. And we know when you look at guys like Jerry Jones, when you look at Jeffrey Lurie, the Eagles owner, they will absolutely recognize that there are a number of high-profile coaches out there, not the least of which, the greatest of all of them, Bill Belichick.
And we're not talking about the Cowboys or Eagles right now when I say that there are 7 head coach openings right now. We will see if there's going to be more later this week. Marcus, what do you make of the fit here with Belichick in Atlanta, especially when you see all the pieces that they have on offense?
I don't love it. I'm going to be honest with you, Kev. Dan has alluded to this a bunch of times. Bill Belichick has to have a quarterback, and he needs an offensive coordinator to let that side of the ball go. This is not about if he can coach. Bill Belichick can coach any team in football. But I think the offensive part of the game is something that has shown weakness for him to be able to not only draft for, but to have in order if it's not for Josh McDaniels and somebody having that under the tutelage. He obviously made the hire of Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, probably one of the worst marks on his coaching career when he decided to do that. But when you look at the teams out there, I thought the Los Angeles Chargers would have been right for Bill Belichick to go in and change the tenor and the tone and the culture of that team. Atlanta, anybody that gets Bill Belichick wins, but I love to see him go to a place where a quarterback can play at a high level.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. Bill Belichick fits everywhere. He's that good of a coach. I do not care what the organization is. Now, everyone keeps saying, well, Bill Belichick is interviewing them. I understand that perspective, and I respect it. I think there's 3 questions that the teams in Atlanta have to ask him. Number 1, are you okay with not picking the players on this roster? Because that is what happened in New England, and that's why he's no longer the head coach. I do not believe that Atlanta and their Terry Fontenot, their offensive or their general manager, give that up. Number 2, who's your offensive coordinator? The offensive coordinators of the past couple years in New England have not brought modern-day offenses. Guys, watch the next 2 rounds of the NFL playoffs. Everybody but maybe Buffalo puts their quarterback under center a ton. They run a ton of play action. They run a ton of pre or at the snap motion, and they run condensed splits. That is not what New England has done. And the third thing, Marcus alluded to it, is who's our quarterback coach? Who's going to be the quarterback? Do you pick it? Do we pick it? Do we want to trade up? So I think he fits anywhere, but I do think it's fair to say, even though he's Bill Belichick, there are some very real questions that have to get answered.
And he's got to go to a place where you can win now. Go ahead, Marcus. Go ahead.
No, it is fair. They've sucked on offense.
Yeah.
And he's been bringing the groceries.
Right.
They've been bad.
Right.
So it's not something that we've just made up about Bill Belichick. Obviously, you lose Tom Brady, you're going to fall a few levels down as far as the quarterback play. But even schematically, player-wise, and quarterback-wise, shifting and shaping, trying to figure out who that guy is. That's a part of the gig, bro. Yeah. Especially when you're the GM. He's been bad in that regard.
You know what I would think would be fascinating? If Bill Belichick goes to Atlanta, does he hire Greg Roman, who was the offensive coordinator in Baltimore, who did a lot of great stuff with Lamar Jackson? Do they go get Justin Fields from Chicago in the trade? The only caveat I would say is this, Marcus. If he does that, he does need to bring in somebody that is a passing game mind and or coordinator, because that's what held Greg Roman back. If they can kind of bring somebody and morph that together, then they got something.
By the way, 15.
It could get scary. Yeah, for
15
sure.
wins away from passing Don Shula for the all-time wins mark, too. So wherever he goes, you know he's in the mindset, I have to win in the next 2 to 3 years. What's the latest on Mike Tomlin's status after yesterday's loss to Buffalo?
Well, Kev, our very own Brooke Pryor is reporting right now that Mike Tomlin has informed the team, his players, that he will in fact be returning for the 2024 season. He has 1 year remaining on his contract. The reason, though, that this is news, of course, is he was asked in a press conference a day earlier. He walked off the podium without comment, leading some to wonder perhaps if there was some kind of change coming in Pittsburgh. I can tell you, though, again, Brooke Pryor reporting that he will be back. He has received unanimous support from his locker room, including most recently Cam Hayward, who made very clear that he believes in Coach Tomlin. So again, 1 year remaining on his deal, but he will be back in 2024.
So no Pete Carroll in Seattle, no Bill Belichick in New England. So we've got Mike Tomlin as the longest tenured NFL head coach with a franchise. But a big question continues. The quarterback situation, Marcus, especially what we saw with this team moving around multiple times. What should the Steelers do next here at QB?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Brooke P for asking the question that seemingly nobody wanted to answer, and then getting more information the next day for us to get this report. One, I'm glad Mike Tomlin is coming back, but Mike Tomlin knows as well as anybody, it doesn't take the media to tell you that he's going to have to find consistency at the quarterback spot. And yeah, I know what Mason Rudolph did at the end of the season. Mason Rudolph ain't going to win you a Super Bowl. And Mike Tomlin has never started the season off without the idea of trying to win the Super Bowl and feeling like you are good enough at that position. So when you look at this roster, it's a lot of talent. The most important question, just like we talked about with Bill Belichick, is who will be the signal caller, and do you feel like once we get into the playoffs, we don't have to play one particular way of football in order to win games? That'll be the question going into the season, and hopefully they'll get it figured out. But it's some quarterbacks that may be out there that he feels like he can win those types of games with. Russell Wilson to be available. Justin Fields may be available. It just depends on where Mike Tomlin is with that particular position.
Yeah, the number one call should be to Chicago. And you're trying to see where they stand with Justin Fields, if they're going to take somebody at number one or keep him. The second call would be to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't think Baker Mayfield is going to leave them, considering they're in the divisional round playoffs, but I would make that my second call. My third call would be to the Vikings. Where do you stand on Kirk Cousins? You can't go into next season with just Kenny Pickett. Do I think that Kenny Pickett should be given the chance to compete for the job? Sure do. Now we have to figure out who's going to be their offensive coordinator. Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner, who kind of became the replacement pieces after they fired Matt Canada, had done a nice job. They did. They brought a little bit of an identity. He's got to figure it out. Coach T, he's got to figure out if he wants those two guys to be in that role moving forward. But those would be the first three calls. They don't have a lot of holes on this football team. They got to get some linebackers, some safeties on the defensive side. But to Marcus's point, this is a talented football team. But the first call is to Chicago. The second call is to Tampa. And the third call is to Minnesota.
By the way, keep in mind, he's got 1 year left on this contract here currently, signing a 3-year deal in 2021. Mike Tomlin staying with the Steelers heading into next season.